Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Caregiving Gen X Style. I'm Steve Mullen.
And I'm Jennifer Mullen.
You know, one of the most common roadblocks to caregiving is when your elderly loved one loses their ability to handle their own money. In this episode, we're going to talk with a financial advisor and author about how to have a very tough conversation. But first, Jennifer, how's your mom?
Goggy's doing well. I do have a funny little story. So for anyone who has an elderly loved one in their life, you may be aware and be familiar with the fact that they no longer have a filter. And that was very evident this past week. So I will often swing by Goggy's apartment on my way to the office. And I think it was like Monday this week. I did a quick drop off of her laundry, and it's always nice just to see her in the morning, give her a quick kiss. And, you know, when I see her during the week, of course, I'm dressed for work. So dressed professionally versus when I see her on the weekend and I'm in shorts and a t-shirt. And so I'm dressed and I walk in. Oh, you look so pretty. And I love your pants and your shoes. Great. This is a great way to start my Monday, start my week. Compliments from mom. And then standing there talking to her for a little while. And I think I raised up my right hand up to my neck, like to scratch myself or something. And I had a bracelet on my hand and I was wearing a necklace and standing in front of her. And I do that. And she said, "Oh, but that necklace and that bracelet, I don't like those together." I said, "Oh, well, thank you so much for the opinion that I did not ask for."
Yeah, fashion advice from Goggy.
And by the way, it's time for me to go.
Yep.
But, you know, of course, I chuckled about it. And then I texted my brother when I left and said, "Oh, this classic mom, like, here's what she said to me this morning." He said, "Oh, truth." And I guess earlier he had taken some quiche to her and she said something to him along the lines of, "You know, I don't usually like your quiche, but this one's good." So, you know, at least it's equal opportunity between brother and sister.
If your brother's listening, I'll go ahead and say, I don't know what she's talking about. His quiche is always good.
It's always amazing.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, that's how Goggy is. Just a funny little aside, which is to say that she's doing well. I feel a little bit like we're in the good old days and I'm trying to appreciate it, as we've talked about before. So Steve, how's your mom?
My mom's fine. No real problems to talk about. I did have a funny story though. So a couple of weeks ago, there's a salon in her assisted living where she goes once a week and she either gets a cut or a style or a wash or something along those lines. You know, the things the ladies like to do. And she's been there for more than a year now, and she's still trying to train them to cut her hair the way she likes it. Right. They haven't been cutting it short enough. And she asked me, she said, well, and she's got one of those digital picture frames where you can upload pictures to it. She said, there's a picture on my reel. She calls it her reel. On my reel.
You'd think she was on Instagram or something. Think, yeah. But anyway. Yeah.
There's a picture on my reel over there of what the haircut that I want. Can you just take the picture out of there? I said, no, I really can't. I said, oh, the only thing I can do is take a picture of it with my phone and then print it out. She said, oh, yes, do that. Just bring it next time you're here. So, of course, I did it. I took the picture, but I completely forgot to print it out or bring it to her. So the next time she's disappointed, she said, oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to do on Wednesday when I go over there. I'll figure it out. So I see her on Wednesday. Sure enough, her hair looks nice. It's a little shorter. And I said, well, what did you do? She said, oh, I drew them a picture of the haircut I wanted. I really wish I could have seen this picture.
I seriously wish that she would have saved it.
My guess is that she left that behind in the salon or just threw it away or something. It's a darn shame because I would have loved to have scanned that and put it on our Facebook page for this podcast. Yeah, and she should have
saved it, frankly, for the next time. I mean, I don't know if it's always the same hairdresser.
I think it usually is.
Okay, but eventually at some point there could be, you know, a substitute.
This is true.
It would have been great if she would have saved it.
So my mother using her artistic abilities, which I will go ahead and say out loud.
Are there artistic
No, there are not. I don't remember her ever drawing anything. Yeah. So,
all right, well,
that's my story.
Okay. Yeah, well, we both had funny stories for this week, so that's good.
So let's get into our episode. You know, there are a bunch of talks that you have to have in your life that can be very uncomfortable. I'm sure we can all think of a few if we've had children in particular. On that list is having to discuss with your elderly loved one that you think they need help with their finances, or maybe even that you should completely take control of their finances to ensure they don't end up completely broke.
Yep. So in this episode, we are joined by my name twin, Jennifer Lee, an author and founder of the financial advisory firm Modern Wealth. in Sarasota, Florida. Jennifer, welcome to Caregiving Gen X Style.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And by the way, when I say name twin, I mean literally my middle name is Lee also. I think it's spelled differently. And Lee,
that's great.
I guess Lee is your last name, but still, I'm a Jennifer Lee too.
It is. And there's lots of us.
Yes, indeed there are. Yes, if you're a child of a certain age or an adult who was born in a certain decade, a whole bunch of Jennifers. Well, first off, as we always ask our guests, how are your parents, Jennifer?
So I lost my dad about just going on 10 years ago. And my mom is pretty good, but she is, going to be 79 tomorrow, actually. She'll be 79 tomorrow. So,
Happy
she's
birthday to her.
Thank you. She's dealing with some of the things that you deal with when you start to get in that 75 plus age bracket. So a little less filter, like you shared, and some interesting challenges with the children.
And does she live independently?
Yeah, she lives independently. I'm in Florida. She is most of the time in Maryland, but spends 5.5 months in Florida, in a couple hours from me. So in the winter.
Okay. She's a snowbird, right? That's what they call them.
She is a snowbird.
So, tell us about yourself and your business. Tell us about everything.
Sure. So, I'm an advisor. I work primarily with women in financial transition. That doesn't necessarily mean exclusively women alone, but it happens to be the niche that really I think I'm most valued in. It's when there's loss of a spouse and a little bit of whether it be through divorce or through death. There's a lot of chaos and a lot of transition that has to happen. And our job as advisors is really to understand what people are going through, understand what they're trying to achieve in their life, and then making their money work for them so they can create a life and continue on in the best way possible, in the healthiest way possible financially. And that's just kind of been my niche. I'm originally from Maryland. I've been doing this 29 years. Love talking about money. I got it honest as a young kid. Entrepreneurial in nature from the beginning. I used to sell candy bars on the school bus on the way to school. So
awesome.
I can't help it. It's in my blood.
Yeah.
Were these candy bars that you just bought at the store and then turned around and sold for more?
You got it, Steve.
Okay.
I would buy a 6-pack of Snickers.
Good for you.
Get my own hunger fix covered, and sell the rest so I could buy
And then
more
make
the
your
next
money
day.
back.
I love
That's
it.
Right.
fantastic.
I mean, I just fed my hunger. So.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I want to mention too, you said your niche is really in particular with women. And I'm going to say this, I assume, I don't have a statistic in front of me, but right, women, the average lifespan is longer for women,
absolutely
right?
it is.
Okay, right. So
and actually the majority of caregivers are women. We talked about
right.
it in our
We did talk about that.
previous episode, that I believe it's 61%, something like that are women.
Yeah.
Life expectancy typically is 5+ years.
Right. Okay.
Longer. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Well, so what are some of the, let's start with the most basic signs that you might notice about your elderly loved one that indicates to you that they might need some help with their money?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a trained professional, we have to be mindful about our clients and becoming and being aware of what their challenges are. So it can be something as simple as forgetfulness, repetitive nature, not really taking in the information, paying bills more than once, bouncing checks. It really depends on the situation. But a lot of my clients historically have been what I'll call the non-moneyed party. So they're the party that really wasn't in charge of handling the finances. I mean, that demographic is shifting. But for those who are going through this transition period right now, I'd say in the next 10 years, there's still quite a few who didn't necessarily handle the finances.
Right.
And so it's more onerous for them to do that. So oftentimes the kids have to get involved, right?
Right. And I think, you're describing my mother, really. And, my father left her in really good shape. He passed away a number of years back. And he was always the one that handled, the finances and whatever investments they had, IRAs, stocks, whatever. Thankfully, she had a good financial advisor, much like I'm sure you are, that kind of walked her through it. But these days, honestly, he doesn't even talk to her. He just talks to me. And, honestly, I probably know only a little bit more than she does when it comes to this stuff. And I'm constantly telling him, speak to me like I'm a 5-year-old, because that's about all I know. But, what you're describing is basically my mother.
I mean, as a family, we just had a discussion with my mom last weekend, right? The kids. And we went over everything. And, she certainly has questions. She understands the high level stuff. I'll tell you a cute story. We went over her finances and told her how much money she has, or reminded her. And then we decided we couldn't get her car to properly be hooked up to Apple CarPlay because it's too old. Mm-hmm. So my brother and I were out there messing with the car for 20 minutes or so. And we come back in and he goes, all right, you're getting a new car, Mom. You're getting a new car. We're just getting you a new car. And so we said, good news, you're getting a new car. And he goes on to say, he had just bought his daughter a 1-year-old Acura. He's like, it's the same size. I think it'll be a really great car for you. And she stops and she goes, this is where the filter comes in. And she goes, you just told me I have plenty of money. Why can't I have a BMW?
Okay.
And so it's like, yes, you're right. You can have whatever you want. I mean, it's there. So they're on top of it. But maybe not in the weeds about all the details of it. And I think not necessarily my mom, but as people get older, it's harder to manage all the technology stuff, all the 2-factor authentication when you're logging into a bank account or your credit card to make a payment. You have to get this verification, and it gets to be challenging.
Well, and even, dealing with just something that should be a little simpler, like Social Security. You pretty much have to log into a website to find out anything anymore.
True.
Yeah. So, a lot of people are very secretive about their finances. Neither of our mothers really are, but I know a lot of people of their generation, they just don't want to talk about money. It's something you don't do. What should we do with a parent who insists that it's none of our business what they do with their money?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I like to... I find that I mentioned earlier that I'm very comfortable talking about money. Most people are not. There's a sliver of people who will corner me at a cocktail party and we'll talk shop, right? And and I'm in heaven and they're getting their questions answered. But most people really don't want to dig into it. So what I've done in my practice is really talk to kind of open the conversation so it's comfortable. Is talk about writing your family love letter. And that's really about taking care of your people. So I'll just give you an example. So if you are you have somebody who's your loved one, whether it be your kid, your spouse, your children, you're writing them a family love letter and telling them where the resources are, where the assets are, where the income is, who are the people they can trust. You're imparting your values and your hopes and dreams for them in that love letter. You're telling them about your expectations of them. You're telling them about what you want at your funeral. You're telling them about what was important to you in life. And that is a way I find to help a client talk about those things that are your resources. Like, you have life insurance, you have long-term care, you have so much income. How are we going to make sure that these things are taken care of? So mom and dad, how can we make sure that we support you in this process? And where do you want those things to go? And a lot of times, unfortunately, the answer is going to be, I don't know, or none of your business. Right. So we have to tread lightly.
Well, in that thing, I guess they should tell you where they buried the gold in the backyard. They should tell you the passwords of everything. And the problem is they may not remember any of that, like you said.
Precisely. And so, there are things like, and you guys, if you don't already do it when you're traveling, you want to make sure that if you have an Apple iPhone, you want to make sure you have the legacy contact on there so that somebody can get into your phone. God forbid you're not able to be there or something happened to you. For your parents, you want to start trying to get a beneficiary added to banking accounts to make things more streamlined, powers of attorney, so that you can expedite things, financial things, if they are incapacitated. And these are scary things and scary discussions for your parents to hear, certainly from you. We always start off with, this is your money. We're interested in making sure that you're taken care of and that your needs are being met. But we don't know unless you tell us what you want.
I'm curious to know, you mentioned, you've alluded to the fact that you have siblings.
Yeah.
How does that play into, so you have the potentially challenging conversation with your parents, your loved ones, but then when you also have siblings in the mix, I'm just wondering how you handle what might be some differences of opinions between you and your brothers and or sisters, and also, right, like does it get awkward if you're talking about, for example, beneficiaries? I mean, sure, in an ideal world, everything is just going to be split evenly, but it just feels like that could potentially bring some additional awkwardness.
Yeah, I think it certainly can, and it's and it also depends on the family and the financial capacity of the children. So let's say you have 4 children, and 3 of them are doctors, lawyers. They have really good jobs and make really good money, and one of them is a teacher and doesn't have assets. So it's more important maybe for the teacher to be focused on their share of an inheritance than the others, because the others is just extra and ancillary, right? So that can be challenging because everybody's economic state is a little bit different. And certainly capacity to handle these things, whether you live locally or, your siblings live far away. Sometimes there's differences between men and women, right?
Sure. Yeah.
In terms of the contribution to caregiving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, we've explored that topic a lot in terms of, yes, the actual caregiving itself. But the finances, definitely feels like a whole other level. Of course, my brother and I'm gonna make light of it because it is what it is. And Steve and I have talked about this many times on this show, that our moms are in very different financial situations, which is to say Steve's mom is in a lovely financial situation. My mother does not have 2 pennies to rub together. It is the way life worked out, and through no fault of her own. But, so of course we joke all the time, like there's nothing to fight over, nothing to discuss.
Who's going to get her recliner?
Once Goggy's gone, right? The recliner. That's
it. Maybe the television set. That's it.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, moving on to the next question. Let's talk about things on the flip side a little bit. So if maybe you've got someone, it's not so much the secretive person, but simply the stubborn loved one who just insists that they can handle all of this themselves, right? They've got it under control, even though there might actually be evidence that they're actually not doing a great job. How do you approach that?
Well, it's a delicate dance, because if they are capable, you really can't do anything more than continue to have these conversations and try to convey to them that you can be of value and help. If there's a financial person involved, then maybe they can be part of that conversation as well. But if the person has capacity and they're just stubborn, I mean, we're kind of stuck, right? If you get to a place where they aren't financially competent or mentally competent, then you can involve the courts, you can involve your financial powers of attorney, and you can go that route. But just because your parent is stubborn doesn't mean that you get to do anything with their money and give them instructions, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's, I've got a couple of different friends actually whose parents are still, they're not quite in the situation maybe that Steve's mom is or my mom is yet, but they're very much paying attention to us and what we've been going through. And I've admired how each of them is handling things, one with her parents, one with her dad, who lives in an assisted or lives independently, but is in a facility where there's the step down options. And they're trying to have conversations sort of slowly over time to, for lack of a better term, plant the seed, so that eventually it really becomes the parents' grand idea that they need to make a move or maybe handle finances differently or whatever that is. So I certainly would encourage, I've been listening to these couple of friends and the way they've talked about doing that with their respective loved ones. And to me, that's I think a really good tactic if it can work for you, if you've got a little bit of time to let that work for you.
For sure. And you don't feel like you have any time. Let's just say that.
True.
But we've had those multiple conversations, and it's coming from three different kids, and it's coming from three different perspectives and little bits here and there, nothing like a big, my habit would be to, be subtle like a brick, but that's not going to work with my mom. Right. So I talk to her about client situations. I share different things that other people are doing. And truly, we want to make sure that, she has the best quality of life. And what does that look like, right? How can we help her live her best life most comfortably?
Well, yeah, and it's interesting as you're talking, I'm thinking about my parents. And my mother, honestly, it was no trouble. She wanted me to just go ahead and take over everything. And she pays her bills herself, some of her bills herself. She writes out checks, etc. But when we're dealing with the investments, she wants really very little to do with talking about that.
Yep.
And frankly, I don't think she understands it. I don't fully understand it either. I'm not a financial person. I'm not a numbers person. But I can at least talk to her financial guy and make sure I at least know what's going on, sort of. If the situation was reversed with my mother had passed away before my father was in this situation, absolutely not.
He wouldn't let you within 10 feet of any of this,
exactly.
I think.
He would have said, until the point where he didn't know who he was or where he was, he would have been the one doing it. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. And Jennifer's nodding her head because she remembers my father. He's pretty stubborn.
And I don't mean that. Right, it's not even a criticism of your dad.
It's who he was.
Yes.
Yeah.
He would have insisted on remaining fully independent to the last possible second.
Absolutely. So, it's kind of funny, this whole giving up financial control. It's almost like giving up car keys. Offering to help with finances or take over control can cause a lot of conflict. What do you suggest we do if the conversation gets heated?
Oh, if the conversation gets heated, you have to take a pause, right? And that's happened because emotions are involved, right? So whenever anything like that happens, I just kind of say, okay, let's just take a minute. Let's step back from this. And first, let me just reiterate, Mom, I love you. This is all about you. That's my intention. But let's table this for a minute and let's talk about this tomorrow or the next day, because I'm not trying to upset you, right? So, but it happens. So you have to be able to put it on pause and not, there's no sense in arguing about it, right? It's not gonna go anywhere good just to keep elevating it. So I try to put it on pause and then circle back to it and maybe go in a little bit more gently, or have the gentler sibling go in and talk about things from different perspectives. We will shift around, who brings up what topic.
That definitely makes sense, right? When you have children, we know our two children are very different from one another, and they would bring different strengths to the table,
right.
and that's true when talking with us as their parents, certainly with them, with their grandmothers. So that's actually a really interesting, and I think we've talked about that a little bit before when it comes to some of the caregiving, right, Steve? Like siblings who approach caregiving in general very differently, and you kind of try to balance those things out.
Right. Well, and the hope is that you have two people with different strengths that are both useful.
Yes.
As opposed to one that's got strengths and one who's absolutely terrible and doesn't want to do it.
Right. Yeah.
So, there's that.
That's like the worst case scenario.
It really is.
Yeah. Another big issue, aside from, just the helping to pay bills and manage a checking account, and that's dealing with debt. So people have a lot of differing opinions on whether or not debt is a big deal. And of course, debt is a pretty vague word in that, what Steve thinks is debt versus what I think is debt could be two very different things. So how do you deal with a parent, though, who might have a very different view of debt from you?
Generationally, probably the boomers that are starting to deal with these things, they don't like debt, right? They often pay things off rather quickly. But I guess it just depends on what we're talking about, right? Are we moving them from a house with a mortgage into an extended care process where they have independent living and then they continue on? Are we, what is the situation around debt? Is it credit card debt? Is it personal debt?
Well, and I think there's also what I was, when I put down these copious notes, which, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm the one that writes the notes.
Steve has to say that. He just has to point
Well,
that
I
out.
do, but I think it's also tolerance for debt. Some people, they're not worried about having $5,000 of their credit card. It just does not concern them one tiny little bit. Jennifer and I would be having a hissy fit over that.
Yeah.
Even though we certainly could pay it off whenever we needed to if we had to. But I think that's kind of what I was talking about, more tolerance for debt.
Yeah, well, when we talk to clients or prospective clients about their money and their debt, one couple may have a complete intolerance similar to yours of any of these, accumulating bills. So I call that the sleep at night factor, right? That matters. I'm not going to talk you into continuing debt so you can invest money if you can't sleep at night. Like, we want, what is specific to you and your family's needs and your own cash flow, and what's a smart decision for you? That's what we're looking at. So it depends on the client. I just spoke with a client a little while ago, and he said, well, we're thinking about buying a new car. And I said, well, that's great. I said, buy it. And he said, well, should I finance it? And I said, well, if they give you 1.99 or 2.99, then we can think about it. But you have the cash. The market is up. Why not just take the gain and buy the car?
Right. Yeah. And that's something that we've even talked about with, well, at least one of our kids. I won't mention which one. They have a lot of savings, and we just keep suggesting, well, why don't you pay this off, or why don't you pay this off? Use some of that savings. So, I think you're right. I think our parents, you mentioned boomers having very little tolerance for debt. I think the generation behind them, which is our parents, silent generation, I suspect they have even less tolerance for debt because they remember the Great Depression, or at least they were born right after it and heard the stories.
Sure.
So, but then some folks that are taking care of it, so you're dealing with us, the Gen Xers, and maybe some of the millennials, they're more just used to carrying around a credit card that's got however much on it, and it's just not that big of a deal. So I think it's just, I guess it's a matter of, like I said, it's your tolerance for it.
Well, there absolutely are generational experiences. If you look at the booms and busts of the market, and I don't have that slide in front of me, but I've seen it. Every generation has a different attitude about debt, about vacation, about saving, about taking risk and investing, and it's all because of whatever experience they had in that demographic in their formative years.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to me because I guess, our parents, if they're a little older, the silent gen folks, they, like I said, they may remember the Great Depression, or they heard stories from their parents because it wasn't that long ago. You look at the millennials, I guess they came into the job force right when the Great Recession happened. And so, I completely get what you're saying. There is almost a generational tolerance for this kind of stuff.
I wonder too, Jennifer, if your elderly loved one has, let's just say, a significant amount of debt, let's just agree that everyone agrees that it's a significant amount of debt, and they are, now in a position, where they need additional care or they need to move to a facility, like whatever that is. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't recommend that the children, sort of take on that debt. How do you tackle that? How do you help them get rid of the debt, or what do you do?
Well, I think you first look at what is the net assets of the person, and do they have, what is their Social Security? Do they have pensions? Do they have investments that are generating dividends or interest? Their debt, is it tied to a piece of real estate that they can pay off and have a positive number to? I really would look at what kind of care do they need, and how are we going to best facilitate the assets to be to the benefit of that person and their longevity in a independent living or in assisted living or whatever the facility might be. It can be expensive, and it can be a long-term thing. I think you look at what the net number is. I wouldn't have the kids paying the parents' debt, no. But the kids may end up having, if the parent doesn't have net assets that will allow them, or income that will allow them to be in an appropriate and healthy and safe place for them, then sometimes the kids have to kick in some money.
Well, and here's a question. It may be a dumb question, but speak to me like I'm a 5-year-old, as I said earlier. If someone passes away with, say, $10,000 in credit card debt, what happens to that $10,000?
Sure. Is that person married? And
no, we'll say no.
So does that person have other assets?
Okay, so that's what ends up happening.
Well, I mean, effectively what happens is there is something called I don't know what the technical term of it is, but it's basically a death database. Okay. And when somebody dies, that gets recorded, and that database goes out to all the credit card companies, and it's out there for searches. It goes to Social Security, and any creditor can cross-reference their death database against their debt that's out there. So let's say your parent had an American Express and a MasterCard and $10,000 on each of them. Both of those companies will move it to a collections division inside of each of their companies, and then they will call the beneficiaries and the executor, and they will start calling. And they'll be very, they're not your typical debt collector. They're a little bit more seasoned, and they, tell you that they're sorry for your loss. They're just trying to figure out what's going on with the account, and they're trying to assess whether or not there are assets, right? So if everything is in trust and buttoned up and had beneficiaries associated to it, you really don't have to do anything with it, and it could really kind of go away. But if you have bank accounts and you have other assets that are outside of that have to go through probate, then those agencies would be trying to obtain those assets.
So what you're telling me is if you have a parent that does not have assets and maybe they're not doing so well, just go ahead and run that credit card up. It doesn't matter.
I'm not giving you that advice.
Yeah. I know that's not what you're saying. You know what? I'm saying it.
You're not getting me to say that, Steve. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm saying it.
I'm saying that if that person doesn't have any assets, there's nobody to collect from. Now, the credit card collection agencies will try to collect from you or your siblings, and a lot of times people will feel compelled, mom always paid her bills, I'll make a payment on it, but you are not obligated to.
Well, that's good to know, at least. Yeah. So where can people find out about you, your book, and your business?
Sure. So I have two websites. One is my business name, which is modern and then a hyphen and the word wealth.com. And then my book is called Squeeze the Juice. And so the website is squeezethejuicebook.com.
It's all about orange juice?
No, it's about getting the most out of an experience. It's about getting the most out of this conversation. It's about, Jennifer getting the most out of that visit with her mom and chuckling about the fact that, she's making fun of her jewelry or something like that. It's getting the juice, right? It's that little nugget of good stuff and then leaving the rest.
Love it. Love it. Jennifer Lee, author and founder of the financial advisory firm Modern Wealth. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was fun.
I appreciate it. Thanks to everyone for listening to this episode. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us caregivinggenxstyle@gmail.com. Please keep sending us those how's your moms, how's your dads. We love hearing about how our listeners' parents are doing. Silly stories, sad stories. It doesn't matter. We want to hear them. You can also send us a text or a voicemail. We love voicemails. 804-723-1221. You can find us on Twitter and Blue Sky, the handle on both @GenXCaregiving. And please join us on Facebook. That's where we post the most on social media. Just go into the show notes for the episode. There's a link there. Click on it. Boom, you're there. We hope to hear from you soon. Have a great day.
Good night, everyone.